Thank you for joining us today. We're here with a Surpass Community Webinar and we'll be looking at an accessibility update. I'm joined by Leon Hampson from our accessibility team, accessibility team lead. And the reason for this webinar, if we move on to the topics that we're going to chat about today, we were thinking it's been about a year, well, probably longer than a year now since the team was created, wasn't it? We did a webinar around 12 months ago and we looked at some of the reasons why we've created an accessibility team, the sort of things that we want to address. There was a very small update earlier in the year. I sat with Isabella, who was on the team at the time, talked about some of the work we've been doing with screen readers. These are all available on the past webinars page or on the website as recordings, by the way. And then we were chatting work with Leon. There's lots of really good stuff that has happened, lots of really interesting stuff coming up. So we thought now was a great time to give this past community an update, but also the team, the resources that are available, it's all there for the community to join in and seek advice if they want to and get involved there. So lots to cover today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Leon, as we just go over a summary of what has happened in the past 12 months.
Well, a lot. It was when you mentioned it had been 12 months, I just wondered where the time has gone, to be honest with you. But we'd kind of reached quite a significant milestone in terms of the goals that we'd set out for ourselves. And I thought it would be a good time to actually sort of update at that point. So make the news known about that as well. I mean, most of our practice really has been built around building a really robust process around building accessibility into the product. And so that covers anything from research to prototype development through to the documentation of that and then into the development and closing the loop with the testing of that as well. Also, we've been really continuing our original purpose, which is the regression testing and auditing, which is an ongoing process as well.
Okay, so you've mentioned that there is a process involved there, and you talk about prototyping, all that kind of thing. Can you think of any good examples to help demonstrate that to the people who are watching?
Lots, yeah.
Okay.
It goes from the day-to-day sort of stuff that we do, where we boilerplate, for instance. There's a lot of dialogues in delivery. There's a lot of alerts when the candidate enters an incorrect key code, for instance. So those patterns are kind of pretty much predefined. So we template those, which means creates an efficiency when we want to sort of create an artifact, such as a user story for producing that. But then it goes much to the other end of the spectrum, where we're bringing in new items, so converting an item to HTML. So most notably, the extended matching, drag and drop, and also the hotspot. With three things that we follow through with that process. And also as well, new things like the caliper tool, believe it or not, is totally accessible. And all of those started with proof of concept through to prototype. And these are functional prototypes. They're not necessarily graphics or design mock-ups. So we actually code the front end, and that gives us the chance to explore the solution.
So that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. And you mentioned the development kind of about 4 steps down that process and about 2 steps after prototyping. So when it comes to prototyping, you're not engaging the dev team, the scrum teams, if you like, directly at that point. You're actually doing that prototyping. How does that work in the development process? Yeah,
essentially you are, but then it's also a two-way street as well. So throughout the refinement process, you might be continuing that development as the requirement shapes and changes itself.
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, the purpose is to sort of deliver an artifact which acts as an outline for the requirement and gives an objective for the team to work to as well. So in terms of how we want the markup to work, how we want the scripting to work as well, it's very definitive, and that gives them almost like a head start in a sense, really, in terms of giving them the scope of that requirement. And we've got good feedback from the teams in that respect as well, because it makes it very clear as to what our objective is. It's not just a couple of lines in terms of make it accessible. It's very detailed when it comes to that sort of communication.
Yeah, and of course, a piece of software like Surpass is extremely complex. So you can't just go in there and say, hey guys, we've decided that actually you need to change this bit now. So what you're doing is giving them something that you've already tested. It's helping that cycle. It's not interrupting the other work that's going on. It's actually just feeding into it and improving it.
Absolutely, and context is really important. So some of the research will be into how that dependency affects other part of the products as well. So we do get a really kind of broad view of the whole thing.
Okay, great. Is it fair to say that we've kind of met the original goal of the team from when it was set up 12 months ago?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've gone beyond that as well. I mean, we still maintain that sort of regression process that we test every regression, and we do periodically audit as well. So we've just found that we've got so much more capacity that we can do a lot more, and that's led to the process that we follow through now.
Yeah, okay. And at the moment, is all of this internal? Is this all BTL work, or have members of the Surpass community already been involved? Are there any other external influences?
That's something that's been sort of happening over the past 6 months in a sense, really. We've got more direct communication with partners who are working in the test authoring arena as well. So when it comes to us kind of feeding back in terms of what the content, for instance, that they're creating, how that meets conformance standards, I mean, that's something we're really keen to encourage as well. So we've started small steps, but we're sort of taking them in the right direction.
Okay, very good. So we're just going to move on to now one of the major reasons we decided to do this as a webinar was that we wanted to announce the introduction of conformance documentation.
Yeah.
So if I've got this right, this has been around for a little while now, but it was kind of in the background. If a Surpass community organisation wanted this documentation, it was available, but via an account manager to ensure that everything worked, as it were. However, we're now in a position that we're happy to release it to everybody, and it's just publicly available.
Yeah, that's the case, yeah, definitely. So for 1220, that'll be published on the help site. We've had a lot of support from the product communications team as well. We're developing the content of that.
Excellent.
And it'll be available to everybody. Okay,
great. Yeah. So this is definitely more your area than mine, but from what I can see in front of me now, we've got 4 documents that are available. An introduction to accessibility, an authoring accessible test document, accessibility in test delivery, and then the accessibility statement. If we go through each of these one by one, then Leon, can you tell us a little bit about them? So starting with the introduction to accessibility.
Yeah, this is just a really nice little friendly user guide to accessibility generally. In that, I mean, it starts off really the idea we're trying to get across is that accessibility, or making the product more accessible, it's about removing barriers.
Right.
So a lot of the language that we use a lot of the time can be very technical. Use a lot of acronyms, that sort of thing. With this, it's really just very nice and easy to read, and it's the best place to start. If you've no previous experience with it, I'd recommend this one is the best place to start, and it's only a few pages long as well. Yeah,
I was going to say it's only about 2 or 3 pages, if I remember rightly, when I had the sneak preview as we were preparing for this. So, I mean, as someone that's worked alongside you for the past 12 months, but in a completely different department, I've spoken to you about accessibility, and you're right, there are a lot of terms. WCAG comes up quite a lot, and we'll touch on that again later. You know, all these little acronyms and things. And I actually found, even with the knowledge that you shared with me and stuff, you still come away a bit thinking, all right, I'll try and digest that. Whereas this document really did help to kind of go, oh, okay, I need to know this bit, I need to know this bit, I need to know this bit.
Yeah.
And
it's
really, it's an accessible document, accessibility document,
well,
I suppose you'd say.
Can't go better than that, really.
No. Okay, and then we move on to the accessibility statement. So this is the important one, if you like.
Yeah, so this is an issue of a conformance statement. So conformance in the context of WCAG. So it is quite technical in that respect. Okay. It's going to be updated with every release. So on a successful regression, it gets updated and then replaces the current documentation. So it's relevant to the particular release. That's current as well. So
if an organisation has chosen to hold back on a release for, maybe they've got a big testing period coming up and they're prepared for that, and they'll still have the statement that is relevant to the release they're using, but everyone who has moved on will then be able to go to the help site again and make sure that they've got the latest version. So I suppose is there a message there then to people just to be careful that they're not downloading one and then keeping it on their desktop, that kind of thing? It's important to make sure that
it's relevant
they're always keeping themselves
it's relevant to your release as Surpass. So as of 12/20, that'll be the case.
Yeah. Okay, very good. And then, so the next one we've got is accessibility in test delivery document.
Okay. This is really just a list of features that are available that we currently maintain in Surpass Delivery. It's not all of the features that are available, but it's the ones that we look after in regression. So at any point in time, we may update that to increase more features, but the main aim really would be to maintain it at this level going forward.
Okay, and we had an interesting conversation just again while we're preparing for the webinar today. So with the accessibility and test delivery, this is kind of a ready go-to tick box of everything that will work.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that if it's not in this list, it won't work, is it? And that's one of your main goals that you're striving to achieve, is working with the community to meet those challenges.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, any questions about that? If there's something that's not on the list, that's something that you want to use, just contact us and we'll advise you with this conformance statement of that, and if there are any limitations with that as well, or indeed if there's any workarounds needed for it as well. Yeah,
and the thing that really stuck in my head from earlier, I was sort of just being a bit cautious, saying, is it a case of sometimes some things can't be made accessible? In the real world, there are some things that are just impossible for whatever reason. However, you turned around and said, well, actually, that's kind of not the case. We've already had various question types. If you could just remind me.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely not our view. Anything, we can make anything accessible with the right effort. We thought that the extended matching couldn't be done.
That's it, extended matching, yeah.
And it took a lot of head scratching, and the solution that was sort of finalised was very, very clever in the way it works. But it's completely conformant. So conformance and accessibility are one and the same thing. But the same as at the end of the day as well, it's very usable as well. So if you use an assistive technology, and after that point, we just gave up on the idea. And the point of view now is, we'll make it accessible.
Yeah. Never say never.
Exactly.
If it's something you want to challenge the team with, Leon is always up for a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Never sleep.
No, that's what. That makes that's the best thing about the job.
Great stuff. And then finally, so the fourth document that we have is authoring accessible tests. Again, not to talk too much about the thing that this is your area, Leon, but basically it's not just a one-way street, isn't it? It's not that Surpass is a magic bullet.
No. I mean, Surpass, like you say, is like you said to me, it's an enabler that enables you to create accessible tests. But 50% of the story lies in the content as well. So this version of the document is quite comprehensive, and it really does give you a lot of guidance on the whys and wherefores of creating accessible content. So the main areas covered, including colour contrast, alt text, that sort of thing. We aim to develop it much further than this, and we've had some really useful insight and help from the products and comms teams as well. So the guys there have been really kind of proactive in sort of helping us develop the content for this document, and that's something we aim in the future to sort of keep on doing, keep adding to. Because it's one thing that we find in the feedback that we've got is that customers are really keen to know how to sort of develop their test content as well.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that for as long as I can remember in Surpass, we have had some accessibility options in the sense, like you said, colour contrast, that kind of thing. So we've been able to swap the colour of the background and the text and all of that.
Yeah.
Really, this is about taking all of that to the next level, isn't it? That was kind of a good starting point. It addressed a few common accessibility issues, but this is about really, to quote the mission statement, making a significant improvement to everybody who's involved in the assessment process.
Yeah, and we have to do that. We need to sort of take into account the content as well. Yeah, and the more we can sort of help do that, the better result for everybody.
Yeah, and again, the key word there is help, isn't it? This isn't a list of things that we're saying to people, you should be doing this in your test. Why aren't you doing it? This is. There's a lot of learning going on. I mean, certainly we're about to go on to the influence of your team across BTL.
Sure.
And I can speak from personal experience. I always thought I was quite good with accessibility. And then, I met Isabel and I spoke to you more and I started learning. I'm like, okay, it really was just enlightening seeing the difference, but also experiencing things from a different point of view and how that can affect how somebody might take a test. All these things we take for granted. But I was really grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn that and the help and assistance. And I think there'll be a lot of people watching today who now will go, actually, that sounds really good. I'd like to be more involved in that.
Well, we hope so. Yeah, I mean, definitely that's the goal at the end of the day. Because, like you say, with the involvement of the team, it's something that everybody can own. We are specialists in what we do within the team, but that's on a technical level. On a kind of everyday, day-to-day level, we've had some amazing engagement with the sort of the product team and also the wider organisation as well. And it's sort of getting over that fear and apprehension that it's a kind of a specialist technical area, when it does affect everybody.
Okay, so just moving on then, the influence of the accessibility team across BTL. We were going to have another guest today with us, Adam from the documentation team. Unfortunately, he's had to go and do some training, but he was really keen to kind of talk about how, even though he's only been with us a few short months, about 5 months now, knowing that the accessibility team is there and getting involved in those projects has helped. So we did record a very quick video with Adam, and we're just going to play that for you now. It's just a couple of minutes long, on his thoughts on accessibility and how he'd like to take it forward.
My name's Adam Kendall. I'm an assistant technical author and trainer here at BTL. It's a challenge that I'd love to help take on in any way I can. It's a really important issue. When I was going to say, I sort of written down before that coming into BTL, being involved with the accessibility team for the first time, opened my eyes to how big an issue this is. And with the best of intentions, it's going to take a lot of work. All the groups of people that we need to make the software available for, essentially, is vast. But it's a challenge that I think almost more than any other is worth going for. Yeah, I think simplicity is key. We need to make things easy for people to understand and to implement in order for it to be effective. Well, my background has always been in writing, through education, university, and then before my voluntary experience, I worked in the press. A large part of that was making the content of our articles easily understandable, simple, and digestible for people, make people want to read it even if they don't know themselves that they do. And that is something that's really important as well in this line of work. The content, the software isn't developed by myself. I don't have that know-how, but I do have the know-how to be able to digest what could be potentially complex information and to relay it to people in a much more simplistic fashion, which can encourage people to achieve things and do things that they didn't necessarily believe they could before. Once such a big chunk of information is broken down into smaller chunks, and if you'll forgive me, accessible chunks of information, then it makes it a lot easier, makes people more motivated to complete the tasks that documentation requires them to do, because they have that ease of access.
Okay, so thank you, Adam, when you're watching this back, for that short piece. That was really insightful. So talking about the other teams across BTL, I mean, I suppose, I'm from the marketing team, and I've learnt a lot about how we develop the product so that I can then pass that on to people I'm talking to when out and about. But the actual direct influence on the product itself, I suppose you work closely with the product owners, for example, and developers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely with the product team, the engagement as to the level. Well, another way of putting it, really, from the product team point of view, accessibility is the default position.
Right.
So we start from that position, in a sense, when it comes to developing for HTML delivery. Right. Which is a great place to start. And obviously from there, we can do whatever we need to do, really, to sort of make it conformant. And throughout the business as well, we've kind of engaged with a lot of events that we've done over the last year. Most notable was the Accessibility Awareness Day that we did. I don't think it had anything to do with the cake that we made, but it was good cake.
Could be the cake, who knows?
We had a really good couple of hour session there over at Merchants Quay, where we had various sort of members of the team come over, talk to us, learn about assistive technology, and I think I think the best part of that, I mean, where else would you get the chairman of the company coming to join you on
So
a day
Bob
like
actually
that?
came over and got involved, yeah.
And he actually started using the screen reader,
Right, okay.
which was brilliant. So it's just engaging on whatever level we can, really. Not a big fan of kind of standing up and doing seminars. So trying to find interesting ways of engaging with people, making it more an experience that they can relate to their everyday lives, for instance, is really important. Yeah. So it's interesting talking to people when, for instance, maybe somebody's experienced an injury and they've found it difficult, and for instance maybe a broken limb or something like that, okay. Or maybe somebody who's got somebody living with them who's got a disability, brings that home, and it makes it relevant to what we're doing here as well when you do that. And then just offering people that sort of opportunity to sort of engage, i.e. with the software or with the ideas that we've got, does bring it home. So we're kind of winning on all fronts really in that respect.
That's quite interesting, because we do we talk a lot about, you know, moving from pen to paper and the way that people work in general, and I think you mentioned if you've got an injury, so I know that in the past we've spoke to teachers who've allowed students to take tests on computer because maybe they've broken their wrist in the run up to their mock exams or something. So even that is in a way addressing the need for accessibility in someone who is typically an able-bodied person. We talk about the Accessibility Awareness Day, and I've noticed that sometimes we write that as A11Y as a shortcut, don't we? I think I might have snuck that in to the presentation here somewhere and neglected to mention that at the start. So that's because it's 11 letters between A and Y, isn't it?
You know what? I've never counted.
I'm sure that's what I was told. So there's a hashtag there if you do want to find out more about the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Hashtag A11Y will bring up a whole raft of tweets or whichever social platform you're using, talking about that and similar events. I came along to that event, and I sat down for a little while and I played with the screen reader, and it was interesting seeing the voice to text input as well being demonstrated. But I think the thing that really hit home with me was as somebody who is able-bodied and can type fairly well and is fairly computer literate, to then, not to trivialise it, but to say, right, close your eyes and put this headset on and then listen to it, my first thought was, hurry up, I just want to answer the question. And then at that point, trying to navigate a keyboard, something that I can comfortably touch type, but when you're in that position of having your senses kind of taken away, you suddenly...
Well, I mean, when you're first kind of exposed to that, it's quite daunting. You have to remember, if you're using assistive technology every day, then it becomes it becomes almost second nature to you. I think that's one of the great things about it. At the end of the day, we rely on technology so much in our daily lives, not just in our, for instance, in our academic or professional lives, and accessibility is about removing barriers to access to that technology. That really sort of about democratization of the user experience at the end of the day. But assistive technology basically enables that. So by removing those barriers, we do improve the experience for everybody. It's simple, really. It's a simple equation. It's a win-win situation for everybody. But the other thing as well that benefits from the kind of accessibility model is that it really does make you think about the solutions that we're creating in quite different and in quite unique ways as well. And it really sort of takes you out of your normal pattern of thinking. Yeah. And it does kind of make you kind of come up with ideas that you didn't think you would have come up with before. And I think there's real benefits to be had by using this model of thinking that we use. Yeah. And, just open your mind to it, really.
Yeah, we talked about universal design when you did the webinar last year, and that concept. So, if you build a ramp for wheelchair access, it's not just people in wheelchairs that benefit. It may be, new mothers and fathers with toddlers in prams, or it could be someone with a hip problem that can't get upstairs easily. And so that as a concept feeding into exams as well. Yeah. And the idea of universal design there, just making it a level playing field for everybody wherever possible.
There's lots of things. There's lots of things that you don't think about. I mean, the sort of speed and also optimization as well are very much a factor of accessibility as well. So that inevitably, if you improve there, that is going to improve the experience for everybody else as well. So it's quite a broad church, and it's not just about accessibility, or that is the focus. We do take into account a lot of ideas, especially when we're looking at the research as well, like I say, all the dependencies and everything. So I'm obviously, with the job title, I'm a keen advocate of this way of working, but I'm keen to sort of get it out there and sort of share the knowledge with other people as well. Yeah,
great stuff. Okay, so we'll move on to future development. So we talked about what's happened in the past 12 months.
Yeah.
And we talked about the influences on BTL, the kind of things that we're doing in the day-to-day here now. But what's coming up that we're allowed to talk about? We've got quite a few secrets that we will reveal in due time.
Well, our mission is to carry on boldly, going where we've been going before, in a sense. For the mission really is one of continuous improvement. So, like I say, we have reached a milestone in terms of our level of conformance. Is to use that as a platform in which to continuously improve the products, and the effort that's gone into sort of making this process a robust process that is proven to work. We can carry on doing that kind of quite proactively as well. So the idea is that the conformance level increases over time.
Yeah.
And that's the main sort of goal in terms of what we want to achieve. The other thing we want to improve certainly is transparency of the information. We do produce a lot of information in terms of either the audits or reports that we produce as well. So contextualising that and then allowing anybody who's particularly interested in that access to that information. The conformance statement, in a sense, really becomes obsolete the day it's produced, because obviously Surpass moves on from that release date. Is keeping up to date with that is something that we want to sort of share more openly as well. So having that transparency of communication is quite important to us. So for instance, if you're particularly interested in delivering a particular test form, style or feature, then you can check in and see what the conformance level of that is. Also, we want to improve on the documentation as well. So within the product with certain features, take for instance the calculator or the new text editor that we're producing for the essay item. There's a level of interaction there with, particularly with screen readers and keyboard, that we want to improve the documentation on that, so that if you're delivering those tests, you've got access to how to use that part of the system in that way as well. And so there's lots of stuff that we want to be getting on with. And if there's any new projects that come up that we're not privy to yet, we'd be all over them. We definitely want to, like you say, we like the challenge.
Excellent. Okay, so we've had a couple of questions come in. One here, so during the conversation you mentioned customers are involved with question content for testing. Is there a way for the organisation mentioned here to become more involved with this, as we have not yet had an opportunity? I think even I can answer that. The answer is yes, we'd love you to get involved and get in touch. Can you explain in a bit more detail? In fact, I'll move on to the next slide, because that actually ties in very nicely to what we're about to talk about. Further opportunities for the Surpass community, if you'd like to.
I mean, in the first instance, you can email us at accessibility.btl.com. If you copy your account manager in on that communication as well, we can sort of see what we can do to sort of help advise with any issues. A good opportunity will be at the conference. So we've got a presence at the conference this year. The theme is removing barriers. More to be confirmed. I'll tell you what that's all about. But we'll be there as well to be sort of speak to us as well, and just sort of start the conversation really.
I think it's fair to say, as well as your day job, this is truly a passion for you, isn't it, Leon? So there really is no question too big or small, is there? When if people are sat there thinking, we'd like to know a bit more about this, but we don't want to disturb you or take up too much of your time. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm currently planning to design a landscape garden for wheelchair and access in a community growing project that I help run as well. So it kind of spills over into
your personal
my
life
personal
as well.
life as well. Yeah. So doesn't necessarily shut the door on it.
Okay, and there's also a follow-up question just noticed about screen readers and about some initial testing between JAWS and Microsoft. And it's Derek from SQA asking this question, and he's just asking if he can have a discussion with you about some other options. I think maybe, Derek, that's a little bit too much detail for the webinar here, but again, more than happy to.
Yeah, just drop us a line, and any questions that you've got there, we'll do our best to get. Well, we do always aim to get back as quickly as possible. If obviously there's some detail needed there, we'll dig a bit deeper for you and come back with more information if it's required. So yeah, just feel free to just ask.
Yeah, and you're happy to set up Skype calls, that kind of thing, if warranted. And take it further.
I mean, anything that sort of like enables the conversation is definitely, we're keen advocates of that. You know, we don't kind of work behind a wall. We like I say at the end of the earlier on saying, you know, one of our main goals really now is more towards transparency, communication. So definitely.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you very much for the questions there, Derek. So I believe we've come to the end of the webinar.
No.
Leon loves talking about accessibility. If you've got anything else to say, then please do. But yeah, if you have any more questions, the email address again was accessibility@btl.com. That was on the slide at the start of the webinar. We'll be sending out the recording soon, so if you do want to have a recap on any of this, it should be available on there as well. It will be available to watch hopefully in the next couple of days, all being well, at btl.com/surpass/past webinars. Upcoming events, just a quick reminder. So the next one is Wednesday the 4th of September. That's improving the user experience. Then we're at the CNG in Washington, DC. Surpass pre-release webinar will be on the 17th of September. EATP in Madrid in Spain is the 25th to 27th of September. And finally, last but not least, Surpass Conference, where you can meet Leon in person and ask him all your questions about accessibility, is on the 3rd and 4th of October. So with that, there are no more questions coming in. All that's left to say is thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Leon, for delivering this information, and we'll see you again soon.